Vino, welcome to Beyond the Inbox. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me in the chat.
Can you tell us about your background and how you got started in the pet snacks and treats market?
Definitely didn't grow up wanting to be a veterinarian or nor am I any animal health expert in terms of officially official background. My kind of journey into this whole world of direct to consumer and pets really kind of started with the background that my brother and I had, where prior to Facebook going public, I was this 20-year-old studying medical sciences in university. Dropped out because I had this opportunity to join Facebook at a very early time, being 20 years old, and really spent the next 5 years at a very kind of pivotal point where, Facebook was really building this great ads engine as we know today, love and hate. And getting to see, the first time where on the internet we could truly identify people. Prior to Facebook, we weren't really telling our age, our background, where we lived, and sharing all this data. And now, here I was as a 20-year-old working on the ads platform, from newsfeed to Instagram ads to DPAs, anything that we kind of see today, and really get infatuated with the fact that you can reach this like broad audience. You can provide something that's really targeted to them. And of course, we work with, brands and build products for the SaaS side all the way to B2C, but it was really that direct to consumer side that, caught me. Like when you saw, a guy like me who can grow a beard pretty fast, and realizing there's a company that's, has this warehouse out in Buffalo and, shipping razors directly to people's doorstep, and watching, brands like that Dollar Shave take advantage of this ads platform in terms of targeting the right people, presenting the right message at the right time, and being able to kind of disrupt the way someone's day to day is by providing more convenience or a new solution. And more, I just kept getting hooked on consumer products. Is this great opportunity for me to kind of spread my wings and drive a bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. And as I mentioned, both my brother and I, who's my identical twin, we're working at Facebook together. We're really working on the D2C retail on a global scale at Facebook. And after a while, once Facebook does build itself, I don't think they need really myself there to sell that product as we know today. And we saw that opportunity for us to start to build our own brand and take the lessons of like what worked, but most importantly, like what we found that didn't work, and apply it. And that's where, both our personal interests and infatuation for pets and this need to like disrupt this like daily ritual of what we put in their food bowl every day came into place, where when we launched Kabo, the goal really was just to make meal for our pets a little bit easier and healthier by providing this convenience that we saw on the human food side, and this direct trend that we saw towards like fresh eating and the humanization that we have towards our dog.
There's a lot to unpack there. I think I want to start with, how did your job at Facebook help inform your approach to marketing and growth at Cabo?
Yeah, I'll say like when I joined, like Facebook's audit practices were the best. So as an employee, if you're a curious 20-year-old and you want to learn, like I learned a lot about the auction. I learned exactly like how things are ranking, how things are changing, user sentiment stuff. Because really in these auction environments, when you're really looking at it, have this giant population of people, with an ad being forced into an organic feed, and you're really trying to figure out like what works. You can hear all these podcasts about people create and comment and having a certain number of likes or shares. And here I was, with the entire formula on the other end, and really trying to figure out, how these other brands who weren't making it work could make it work, and watching and applying it in a way where I'm taking zero risk, right? So when you're watching a brand like Casper being to our audience or using new tools that we build like lookalike audiences, it was great because, I got to be in the nitty gritty of it, help them execute it, and work on these kind of things, but I had zero risk, right? I'm not the entrepreneur here. And, I even got to spend 8 months in China, and I spent some time in Singapore, and really took these like concepts that we build at such a micro scale as like an alpha or beta. And for those who don't know, whether it's Facebook or TikTok, the number one thing I always suggest is like get into an alpha or beta program, because these are new products that are being built that haven't been touched by anyone and has this great reach potential. And I think for me, that's really what it was. It was like this opportunity to kind of run with these products. And most of my focus was around this cross-border advertising and globalization. And it was these small nuances that I would pick up on where countries like Malaysia has like, or, Southeast Asia, you see this like growth in middle income households. And what's interesting is like the first thing they're getting is a mobile phone. The second thing they're doing is like maybe buying a couple dropshipping products here and there because it's free income. And then in the Middle East, it was a little bit different. They don't have access to a lot of the beauty products, let's say we might have, and they have like higher average order value, and they're willing to take customs and duties. And we started seeing these trends, and I think that was the interesting takeaway on the Facebook side. Not only how this like production works, or like how the products are being built, where the focus is, but really, the application of it, because we actually work with brands who were first movers on it, and seeing how they take advantage of it, why it works, and most importantly, like kind of seeing why it doesn't work.
So you have this realization and you decide to go into this market. Tell me about launching your first product and what your go-to marketing strategy looked like.
I think, starting Kabo and getting into the world of food delivery was definitely not easy. I think, of course, it's so much easier being the guy on Facebook behind the scenes, zero risk, and helping these brands once in a while and not really being part of the day to day. But really, when we started Kabo, it was I'm not like heads all in kind of entrepreneur. It was a very risk averse approach where, for a year, we still had our full time jobs. We were talking to scientists, formulating the first recipe we wanted, working our evenings and weekends. And when we did finally, incorporate the business in January 2019, our approach was like fairly simple. We're just going to develop one recipe and see if we can get, 30 people to purchase this product. Keep coming. A big focus around what we wanted to solve was around a daily reoccurring ritual, because building a business that has a high retention allows us to not focus so much on acquisition, as we've seen that can be the down. Ironically, for running hundreds of millions of dollars in other people's money, we really wanted to be a part of like someone's daily. So when we started, we did all the most unscalable things. We actually didn't even touch paid acquisition for long. We just went on Instagram, searched hashtag Toronto, hashtag dog, focusing on one Canadian city, just started DMing like literally hundreds of people. The conversion rate was not great, obviously. When a random guy messaged you on Instagram trying to sell dog food, I would suggest, you go with it, but we were able to convince 30 people to do it. And it really gave us the feedback around what works in terms of the messaging, what resonates, because, we had this premise that this fresh diet can help dogs live a longer and happier life. And here's the research. And then we also knew that like it makes pooping for the dog easier and it's less poop for the owner to pick up. And we wanted to figure out from us doing these unscalable marketing approaches, what message actually resonates. And the truth was like poop resonates more than scientific research. And that was great because it allowed us to say, okay, there is something that can help the customer to be a little bit more educated on why they're switching. And then on the other end, a lot of the early days building up pet food business was trying to figure out, can we make the contribution margin work with the delivery, the production, and everything? So we see an opportunity to scale it.
There's a lot of great takeaways there. There's something so scrappy about manually reaching out to people and asking them to buy your product. I imagine that's a very vulnerable thing to do.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's you got to really set aside the ego and go for it, because even to this day, we still have that approach where whether it's a new customer that comes on board, or a canceled customer, we still have the approach of like manually reaching out. I still do deliveries once a month, and actually meet the customer and drop off food and get to know them. I think that part in consumer product, I think that's really, really important. You need to have this connection to the customer. And we see it even now more so than ever where, if you're running ads, it's less about like how fancy it looks, but like more around the founder story and why. And so I think like that's always going to be a core part of our culture in terms of how we learn and grow. Because, to this day, we now not only do like freshly cooked dog food, we have drop. We're constantly trying to figure out different product forms that suit the owner's needs as well as the dogs. And then, that's what also drives a lot of our innovation. For our retention, customers going to love getting the same box over and over again, and sure, it solves their problem, but we all have subscription fatigue. So we want to be innovative. We want to draw a sense of community. And, from talking to our customers, that's how we developed our Munch Bar, which is like a protein bar for dogs. Like, think about a Cliff Bar, the dog version of it. And it came from us just like talking to customers during the pandemic. course, anyone who had a dog was the only one outside in Canada at the time. And they'd be going on hikes and they'd be worried the kibble that they're using actually dehydrates, which is true. So we're like, okay, why can't we make something like a clip ball for dog? And, I think our scientist Andrea has been absolutely phenomenal at like taking all my crazy ideas from pizza for dogs to protein bar for dogs. A lot of those kind of initial premises come from the customer. We then, do a bit of like email testing in terms of getting their feedback and then get a pre-orders going and develop an MVP. And if we find that there's this like cohort that's interested in having this product, then it allows us to kind of invest more and more in core. And that all just starts from like putting yourself out there and talking to.
I love hearing stories like that because I feel like it goes against the grain that's often taught in traditional entrepreneur books about if you want to scale, you have to delegate and so on. And I understand that is important, but I feel like that's something that comes up with a lot of e-commerce founders I speak to. My question for you is, how do you strike that balance between delegating and growing in your role as a founder, but also still having that face time with customers?
That's definitely a good question because I could definitely improve on the delegating piece. And I think in hindsight, you always look at it, you're like, oh, she delegated for me. But a lot of it just comes down to action. I think it's okay to make a mistake. I think a lot of the times when entrepreneurs come into the space, we're all like operators. We all have a special background and position. Of course, I want to sit down and run all the, luckily I have a twin who's also great. But the big piece for us is to think process, right? I think when we look at, what's really worked for us in the past is like, it's okay for us to jump in and do something like deliveries, like running the app, running these partnership campaigns that we might do with brands. The most important thing is like, there's going to be always a ton of things on your plate and it's all about time management and what makes it interesting. When I look at things that have given us the highest contribution towards the business, whether it's growth, it's margin development, whether it's retention, whether it's team satisfaction, a lot of that has come from identifying problem, getting our hands dirty and executing. I think that's really important founder. But then as well, like most importantly, figuring out, okay, now how do I scale it and delegate it? And I think like it is hard to just like completely pass it off. And what I found just works for me is like, I'll just whip up a Google Doc, try and put together an SOP, a standard operating procedure around it. And even if I find it hard to like write into words, I'll just like record myself and then put it into a Google Doc. Even if I don't pass it on to anyone, taking that first step of like documenting what you're doing is a big, big kind of lever towards allowing you to pass it on to someone. And I think like just getting into that habit allowed me to be a little bit, it allowed a little bit more ease in terms of delegating things and passing it on.
We're big fans of SOPs here at Jip. One of my favorite books is Built to Sell. Have you read that book?
I still love that book.
Yeah, me too. That's a great book. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about. Actually, let me run up to this question in a different way. In the first episode, I interviewed Aaron Powell from Bunch Bikes, and he talked about his experience of going on Shark Tank. Now, I know you've been on Dragon's Den, and I wanted to ask you how it impacted your journey with Kabo.
So Dragon's Den is a great form. Depending on when this podcast is released, there's still auditions. They're probably doing the taping for the season. And, one thing I love about it, it's a community. Like I think it's a place where entrepreneurship comes to be. It comes to life on TV, whether it's Shark Tank or what they do is like highlight these stories. And for us, when we were building our business, we knew that in order to like be the number one, Canadian fresh dog food player, we really have to get our message out there. And we really needed like people to look us around. And, looking at the consumer products, yes, of course we went to institutional venture capital and actually ended up turning down what you called it an institutional venture capital. And we really looked at Dragon's Den as this platform or what we can actually meet investors that understand this space, have worked in this space, because everyone who's watched Shark Tank or Dragon's Den knows that like, consumer product businesses are definitely highlighted a lot more on these channels. And then two, like it is a great platform to reach tons of people who are probably like first movers or adopters when it comes to new. So when we, were applying and auditioning for it was actually in January 2020. We got into the audition and listed because of COVID, it got canceled. And at that time, we were just actually expanding to out of Toronto, Vancouver as well. Stuck there for quite a bit of time. And then when I got back in July, August 2020, back to Toronto, the film industry was just getting back into things. And Dragon said, hey, listen, we're just going to try and do it this month. Let me know if you guys are free in 2 weeks. And we said, of course. And, we went off to the races, and the focus was right away. Okay, how do we get our product by the time this airs in October across all of Canada, so when people are watching this, they can purchase it? And two, like, how do we actually expand off of freshly cooked food to provide a dry diet as well, so we can use this audience and really leverage it?
It's such a journey to go from DMing people on Instagram to being on national television, presenting your multi-million-dollar business to the Dragons.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a big jump, but I think like when you're in it, it's just like, you don't really get the nerves once you're there. And I think like a little secret between us and the listeners is my brother had a couple shots of tequila before the final shoot, because like it's a 45 minute to an hour shoot for each actual audition that kind of makes it in pitch. And then it gets like whittled down to like maybe a 5 to 6 minute segment if you're more on the featured side. So if you always notice in these shows, there's a little bit smaller one. Usually the end episode is our goal leading up to it was just like, how do we as possible? Literally, we watched every episode of and again. We talked to people who've been on the show, rehearsed constantly, and then a little bit of tequila helped us to kind of get into the flow of things. And after that, it does provide a huge. I always tell people following us being on the show, 3x month over month in terms of sales growth, ready to take on capacity, and most importantly, we have the distribution in place. And I think that's where I saw other people in similar situations not be able to take advantage when you don't have the ability to reach the country. But I think distribution is key to growth as well. These kind of opportunities, when they do come in, do a lot of course. Understand there's a lot of upside around if you don't get the investment. 3, I think it's just they enjoy the moment.
I love that you mentioned distribution, because you and I were talking in our pre-interview, and I want to ask you about Pack Fresh, how it came about, and its role in Kabo's overall strategy.
Yeah, definitely. So Pack Fresh is our cold and frozen 3PL service that we provide other direct-to-consumer businesses and brands to distribute across Canada. And really the way that came about was we were building Kabo, frozen and dog food brand. The reason they didn't exist before is because distributing a frozen product is very, but as we've seen literally over the last 10 years with brands like Hello Fresh and ready to eat foods, it made it easier for humans to get it. So, we wanted to build infrastructure for us. And what that meant was really developing these fulfillment centers around these like core hubs in Canada, British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, where, we have anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 square foot freezer. It gets to up to minus 45 degrees Celsius, which is pretty cold. But as we were growing, what was always difficult for us to do this on the Kabo side of the journey was, the investment of it, right? And I think as an entrepreneur, regardless of how much money you raise, you're always going to be like, I don't know, $200,000 and building a freezer and doing all these things. Like, should I just use a 3PL? Should I just do it myself? Will we get enough volume in this region in British Columbia? Should we just wait until we get enough volume? And I think like that always delayed us, because what we realized was once we developed these fulfillment centers, our reach became phenomenal. Right? And I think when you think about growth, really the key thing is like, how do you reach more? So you need that infrastructure. And when Pack Fresh really came about, it was last year when we saw like the financing market draw up. We saw a lot of, especially on the D2C side. We had a lot of people in the human food space, as well as the pet food space, that were in the fresh, frozen, and even on the dry side, that were saying, hey, listen, we need to find a freezer. We want to expect to see, do you mind if we just like put a pound of our food in your facility? And over time, we saw this this concept where like these guys are going out trying to raise money to build the exact same thing we built in BC. We had the space, we can increase the utilization and help us cover, this OpEx warehouse cost, while actually taking in this ops tech around Kabo, a fresh subscription business to support something like a fresh human ready to eat meal company or a ramen business or ice cream business. And the more and more we kept talking to our friends, we said, let's give this a try. And last year, we rolled out Pack Fresh as a subsidiary brand under the Kabo Lab entity. And what we are able to do is leverage this like operational hub as well as ops tech arm to integrate something like a popsicle or ice cream brand wants to into like, BC or Alberta and truly provide them third-party logistics experience and fulfillment experience that they don't, because anyone's worked in with any type of warehousing company, the biggest issue is like they don't understand what we go through. Right? I think the thing that we found that works really well operating this like supply chain business, running a business when busy enough, I think we really empathize. So for instance, like we can do order cancellation to the delivery. We know customers change their mind, even though we email them a million times to change their orders in advance, but they'll do it last minute. Or we'll be able to provide, better last mile logistics options where, we're able to ship a 15-pound frozen box for $4 instead of going through a federal courier for $12. And we use our group buying power to say, all right, we all need insulation because they're all frozen products. Why don't we buy it together at cheaper rates? I think, running this frozen and cold chain PL business has really allowed us to almost build this dangerous group of food brands who come together, reduce their COGS and provide their customers. And, as we go forward, now we're expanding more pro fulfillment centers to reach audiences like Montreal and really focusing on distribution.
I love that. I love how you solved your problem and similarly problems for other companies as well. Another problem that a lot of e-commerce brands face is growing their website. And something I really wanted to ask you about, which came up in our pre-interview, is acquiring other websites as part of your marketing strategy. You acquired dogbreedslist.com. And I wanted to ask you, what was the thinking behind that? And how are you using it to grow your website today?
It's a good question. I think the way we always look at it is whenever you think of growth, it's, where does that dollar go? And for us, I think what we saw was interesting. Pet owners are constantly searching. From the moment that they're not even looking for, maybe doesn't Googling and researching. Our main concept on the site is really how do you just prior to that. Of course, that intent to purchase is always going to be the highest. Looking for a new mattress. You don't want to purchase a mattress. It's very hard to identify someone who needs a mattress before. But it is a lot easier. We're always making these indication. What do I look for in a dog? I'm searching for shelters or adoption. And dogbreedslist.com was just our affiliate partners, and what we love. Affiliate side is like we get to talk each with there may be more of a traditional part. A list on best fresh delivery options in Canada listed on there. We share revenue from the CPA. So that allowed us to build relationships with a lot of these affiliates, and this is just one of those affiliates where he built this business very early on over WordPress, a great Google rank, and hey, listen, I'm actually thinking of selling this site. Do you mind if you give me some sales data? Sale, and I said, okay, well, this is a great opportunity for potentially take on that role. And I think the reason that it's important is because you kind of want to compare it about putting $10,000 into Facebook versus buying the Facebook, and I'm not sure it gets that return, but it doesn't continue ongoing. Whereas the breed list was in terms of SEO rep, and someone wants to learn about German Shepherds or Bulldog. And for us, we really channel it as an education. We use email to continue to nurture that audience until they're. Excuse me, I'm also losing a bit of my voice here. So, but as I was saying, I think what's really important is like when we're capturing that audience, we're not going into a direction, It's like, how do you continue this like educational journey through email? And then eventually when they are at that point, where you have enough time.
When you bought the website, did you buy their email list as well? Did they have an email list, or was that not a priority for him?
Yeah, they didn't really have an email list. That business was like primarily on affiliate as much as possible. We did kind of optimize a lot more on the email list. Also, like the sale of the email list can be a bit difficult depending on the country and stuff, hassle and everything. So for us, we didn't see it as much of an opportunity, as much of a focus in the beginning. It was like a big piece because you know, we don't want it to be something where you're just acquiring the site and plastering it with like knockoff sales for Kabo. So email was kind of like focused. So how do we navigate them from here's a blog where people just read, or we use email to navigate them to get back into that blog and then find another piece of content. Like they should be able to naturally find these touch points within the blog, bring them to Kabo, and then for Kabo then to opportunity to make.
I popped Kabo into Ahrefs before this recording, and I saw your ranking for some really interesting long tail keywords like how long can dogs hold their pee and how to cook chicken liver for dogs. And I love how you're using content, and I'm curious how content fits into the overall marketing strategy aside from everything you mentioned. Are you using it also to grow your email list, or is it more of a nurturing mechanism for subscribers going through your email flows? I have so many questions, but I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's twofold. So it's definitely used to like nurture our audience. So like our audience always wants to be educated. Like, so when we think about email, it's a lot of like education for the customer. And what the best way to figure out what people want to know is through these like, as you said, like long tail keywords, understanding what people are searching on Google. So we do find it's an opportunity for us to educate them. I think what's always very difficult is like we have to play around with segmentation because it's hard to predict like what people want to engage on an email versus not. And then, the second full part of this is like really on the S piece, right? Like, as I mentioned, like, or on our organic side, we're driving 30% to 30% sales and new customer sign up through organic search. And that's a big piece. And for us, our side just kind of plays both a role as a scientist and as a growth marketer, where she really does the research to find out like what are these things people are searching on. We can build out like domain authority around, and then start to evolve. Where it starts is really from us like writing a blog post around like, what do you do when it needs correct? What does that mean for me? And then taking that and saying, okay, like can we go to a veterinary site or someone else to it? And then, the players like, okay, now how do you add it for our email education for our customers so that they get a better idea? Or maybe like we segment it to specific dog breeds that we know that will be controls them and eat and kind of test it in that chat. And that way we really have this opportunity to like bring people in, might not be looking for dog food, but are looking for an answer. I think like building the thought leadership is important. Whether you're in the plumbing, whether you're in the world of dog, all you want is like your customer to trust you. And that trust comes from like answering the questions and not necessarily yourself, but it could be things to yourself.
Vino, we're soon coming to the end of the interview. I had so many more questions, but I have two more for you. The first is, what does the future hold for Kabo? What are you working on in 2023?
I think for Kabo, it's, as I mentioned, kind of twofold. We have our fresh dog food business where we're continuing to grow and we're still the market leader when it comes to fresh dog food in Canada. We want to continue to increase that dominance, introducing more product forms on dry to cook, things like raw and new product forms. I think that innovation is key for us because we always want to be a solution for what goes into that dog food. As we continue to also develop, one thing that we're excited about is we're bringing a lot of our production in-house as we want to be a bit more agile with these kind of development ideas, as I mentioned, protein bars onwards. So I'm really excited to work on some new projects then that will delight your customers, that we know that drive attention, we know that customer. And then on the other side of it, with Pack Fresh, we're really excited to take a lot of the learnings we have that we've done with Kabo and help these other direct-to-consumer coming in from the US, they're Canadian born, they're coming from outside. I think what's really interesting there is like that's developing this infrastructure, working with the group. There is a lot of this learning, and it's great to see everyone kind of grow together. That for me always excites me to see someone who's gone through something similar that I've gone through and can kind of avoid a little like trauma in terms of building something and saving a bit of money. So I think like both of those ends are really kind of the focus for us that we need.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I've learned so much more about this market, and I have a whole new perspective on the importance of distribution as well. My final question for you, Vino, is where can our listeners go to learn more about Kabo?
You can definitely check us out on Instagram at Kabo Foods. You can also check out our website at kabo.co. And they can also find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Questions.
Perfect. Well, we'll put all those links in the show notes. And Vino, I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us today, and all the best in the future with Kabo.
Shit, thanks for having me.